Thanks for being here, folks. This hopefully will just be a fun way to incorporate a book into how we think about life and how we think about financial planning. So Die with Zero is, I can kind of see people just, anybody read it? Anybody know what it's all about? About clients. Have clients come to you and said, I've read this book. Have you seen it? Yeah. We got Brent said, yeah. This is super interesting. I had not read it until just a couple of, I don't know, months ago, but it kept coming up for the last few years. And people would say, have you read this book? You must know this book. And I hadn't. And even an advisor, much like Brent, came to me and said, I had a client bring up this book that I never have heard about and said, can we do this? So that's been kind of interesting. It's a bit of, for me, confirmation bias, kind of, because I didn't know who Bill Perkins is or was. And a lot of the stuff is a lot of things that I've been talking about, writing about, speaking about for years. I just didn't know that there was this book out there. It could very easily, it's called Die with Zero. It could very easily be called Life According to Derek. So usually, see if I can, they keep moving these buttons around. There we go. So often I will talk about, I'll just go through kind of, here's what Derek talks about. So if you've seen me before, heard me before, this will be familiar. So here's one thing an example of things that I sometimes talk about. So we've got the financial planning profession that we're all in, that we're all familiar with. People who attend webinars like this are a little bit different from your average financial advisor, though. But we're really focused on how do we prevent people from running out of money. Now, if people run out of money before they die, we call that oops. This is a big oops. And this is what we spend our lives helping people prevent. This is the worst. This is the core thing that Monte Carlo is about. Did you do this? That's called a failure. Did you not do this? That's called a success. And if we can get 80% of these to not be oops, then we say we're good to go, client. You're great. I've not ever really liked that because I can tell you exactly how to not run out of money. Sell all your stuff, move to Nepal, move to a village, be the richest person in that village. You'll never run out of money. If that's all you want to do is not run out of money, you can do that. Live under a bridge, put all your stuff in a shopping cart, eat cat food. You won't run out of money. So this hyper focus on not running out of money drives me crazy. But it makes sense because nobody wants to be broke. Nobody wants to do what I just suggested, living under a bridge. Nobody wants to sell their stuff and move to Nepal. So it makes sense why people are hyper focused. Advisors and consumers are focused on not running out of money. And so because we have this fear, we look around and see what are we supposed to do? What are other people doing? So I follow the herd. These people say I need to have an 80% chance of success. Those people say I need to grow my wealth. These people say I need to have $3 million by age 65. And so I do that. Unaware that sometimes following the herd leads us off a cliff. And that, I call that ending in regret, not enjoying our money. So we can help clients build a fortune. But here's the capital T truth here. We're all gonna die one day, and coming to the reaper with a big pile of cash. What's the point? Being the person who dies with the most jelly beans, the most toys, still dies. Again, the reaper doesn't care how much you have. So what are we planning for? So this is the client. We helped him. We helped him or her amass this fortune, and then they realize they have all this money, but they don't have any time. What's the money for? So that's what I've often been trying to help people understand, often through the lens of this existential stuff, knowing that you're going to die. I know that sounds dark, but my view is that helping people become aware of their mortality or becoming aware of the shortness of life helps motivate them to make the most of their time here. Because you can have an oops the other way too. So you could have too much life left at the end of your money. That's the traditional lens. Having too much money left at the end of your life, I think, is also a big deal. This series is it's the most commonly stolen stuff on social media for me. But I like to think of life as this. You were born, at some point you're going to die. This is your sliver of existence. And we've lived some of that. So this shaded bit, this is close to me. Some people have less than this, some people have more than this. But this represents life. And uh, it can be motivating to say, I only have a certain number of years left. But first, remember that this is averages. I might have a life expectancy of 85, but I'm definitely not guaranteed that. And that means I have to use my years well. And if I value time with my mom, I can't just look at this in a vacuum because my mom doesn't have 45 years left or 40 years left. So if I value time with my mom or my aunts and uncles or my older friends, I can't just look at the time that I have left because we've all got our own lifelines. So when I think about how I want to use my life, so to speak, it's helpful to think that I've only got so much time to do stuff. But if I want to do this stuff with other people, I have to consider that as well. I have a friend of mine, Keith, he died a couple of years ago at 46, and his wife, Jill, won't get to do some of those vacations that they had planned with him because they missed out on that overlap. I call the time, you can't really see my mouse there, but the overlap is how much time, shared time you have together. So it is heartbreaking to hear of people who put off trips or they put off experiences, they put off conversations, they put off whatever they put off, and then either they run out of time or somebody that they wanted to use that time with ran out of time. So that's, I think, is motivating. Some people think it's dark, but that's not enough because not all years are created equal. If I take, let's just assume for a second that the past can't be changed. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. And we focus just on the stuff that's left. And we kind of looks like an XY chart. So time is how much time I have left. And let's say that this vertical axis is health. Health declines over time. Mental health, or let's say cognitive health. Cognitive health, physical health, those decline over time. So not all years are created equal. I play a game called squash. 20 years ago, I could play that for 2 hours or more. I could go on a run that same afternoon. No problem. Today I play squash for 2 hours and I can do it, but I'm kind of rickety crickety the rest of the day, kind of limping around. And in 20 years, I'll be lucky to play for 2 hours. And in 30 years, maybe I'm not even playing it at all. So not all years are created equal. But remember, everybody's got their own health lines as well. So it's not enough to say I've got shared time with people. People have different abilities. And so we have to consider that when we're helping clients or ourselves plan experiences. And you could think of people who they wanted to go to France and visit some vineyards, but then the husband got Alzheimer's and now they can't go anymore, or the wife physically can't handle that anymore. My knees can't take it. Then you missed out on going to that trip or going on that trip. And there's a friend of mine. He has an actual experience. This is worse. It's even worse than I thought because for me, I can't go on that trip anymore. Sucks. He has clients who put off going to see the pyramids, and they got there, and once they got there, they found out that it's a lot of stairs and it's really narrow, and they couldn't actually experience the pyramids, which I think is worse. Not being able to go to see the pyramids is worse than going there and then finding out you can't even do it. I guess they got some pictures, so maybe there's a shred of good news there. So making sure that we are aware of this is helpful when we think about the kind of life that we want, the kind of experiences that we want. And this feeds into something I often call last time meditations. Everything that you do will be done for a last time. If not because at one point you're going to die, right? But it's not always that. When was the last time that you held your child in your arms? When was the last time that you went skiing? When was the last time that you went on a camping trip? The last time that you talked to your mother? Okay. Most of the time, we don't know that we're having these last time experiences when we're having them. So sometimes it's helpful to think this could be the last time I go skiing, or this could be the last time that I change my daughter's diaper or something. If you think about it that way, then things that feel like routine chores can sometimes feel more meaningful. And then I often take that and have people, quote unquote, do the math. So, how many experiences do I have left with my mom? Well, let's do the math. If she's got 12 years left and I see her 5 times a year, that's simple math. And when I was working in financial therapy, I actually had chips, poker chips, and I handed out these chips and say, here's your 60 chips. Every time you see your mom, in the bucket it goes. And you get to see how many experiences you have left with your mom, assuming things go well. You can do things to change that math, of course. I could go see her more often. If she wanted to change that math, she could do things to prolong her life. But it helps shine the light on the fact that time is limited. So enter Bill Perkins. He takes everything that I just talked about and he put it into a book called Life by Derek, or I guess he calls it Die with Zero, but it's the same thing. He opens this book with the story of the ant and the grasshopper. That's a grasshopper. It's hard to draw a grasshopper, so just pretend that's a grasshopper. The ant and the grasshopper, common Aesop fable. I've heard it many times in the conference circuit. Often, well, here's one version of it goes like this. It's summertime and the ant is busy grabbing food, collecting things, getting ready for winter. The grasshopper says, what are you doing working so hard? Let's have some fun. Let's play. The grasshopper's trying to distract the ant, playing music, having a good time. Winter comes, and depending on which level of darkness, because Aesop's fables are pretty dark, but there's less dark versions. The grasshopper says, oh, I screwed up. Ant, I need some help. And the ant says, the hell with you. Off you go to die. I'm going to come live my life like I prepared to do. Moral of the story, there's a time for work and there's a time for play. If you go a little deeper, there is a lack of sympathy story in there. The ant didn't want to help out the grasshopper. Or if you go another level deeper, you don't want the ant to enable the grasshopper either. Anyway, time for work, time for play. Fantastic moral. But Bill Perkins says, but when does the ant ever get to play? So usually financial literacy, if we have financial literacy, which we often don't in our country, in the United States anyways, when we do, it seems to be from the perspective of the ant, or with the lessons from the ant, which is delay gratification. Save for the rainy day, save for later, save for next time, save for tomorrow, save for the next decade. And Perkins is very clear to say, I'm not suggesting we stop with the ant lessons and become grasshoppers. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, why do we think this is either or? Why can't we recognize that the ant has some good qualities and the grasshopper has some good qualities? So that's his point. The fable that says work, 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 and then die, that's not a good life. So he goes through and creates a series of, call them rules. And each chapter gets its own rule. So here's his rules for dying with zero and living a good life. Maximize your positive life experiences, starting investing early in your experiences, aim to die with zero, use all the tools you have to help do that, give your money away when it's most helpful or most impactful to do so, don't live on autopilot, think of your life in distinct seasons, know when to stop growing wealth, and take risks when there's little to lose. And he spends a chapter on each of these, and that's the book. So let's start with, I'll just go through each of these chapters and talk about what I thought were the most important pieces of what he had to say. And at the end, I'll add a couple of thoughts on what I think he might have missed, or gotten wrong is too strong, but maybe where there could be some more thought into his approach. And then I'd love to hear what you guys think about his approach. So he starts off with the chapter called Optimize Your Life. The rule is maximize your positive life experience. And he basically says, what's the point of life? What are we doing here? What do we want out of this? And what's the best way to allocate our life energy before we die? So how do we make the most of this finite time on Earth? Similar to the birth death sketch that I have. So what are we optimizing for? And he didn't talk about engineers, but when I do trainings, often advisors will say, all this touchy-feel stuff, Derek, this communication stuff, this EQ stuff, life planning, that's great, but not for my engineers. My engineers, they need the dollars, they need the spreadsheets, they need to have everything optimized. But the easy pushback is because you've trained them to optimize for dollars. But if we help them see that we can optimize for life, they still get to optimize. Now we've just changed the variable that we're optimizing for. So that's what he's trying to suggest here. Let's optimize our life. Let's not optimize for wealth. Let's optimize for the lives of us and those that we love. And at the end of each chapter, he gives recommendations, things to think about. So at the end of this one, he says, think about what life experiences you'd like to have and the number of times you'd like to have them. So that's kind of like the do the math experience chips. Think about what you want to do, when you want to do it, and how many times you'd like to do it. So he's for a lot of people, again, clients of ours, people who are coming to a Money Quotient webinar, are further ahead than, say, your typical financial advisor. But helping clients, helping ourselves see what do we want to do with this life can be helpful. So that's how he sets the stage. Clicker's not working, so there we go. So then he goes into start investing in experiences early. So this chapter is called Invest in Experiences. And he makes the claim, he says, life is the sum of your experiences. Life is the sum of your experiences. So he even suggests plotting this out. He says, give your experiences experience points. So kind of assign a point value, very subjective, to year one, starting this year. You know, you got X experience points. And then year two, you got a couple more experience points. Year three, year four, and so on. So you're kind of tracking your experience points over time. I don't know that he actually suggests getting a piece of paper, actually tracking it. But the philosophy that he's presenting here is to think about your experiences as points. And again, you get to decide that, you know, so you might have a European vacation, you might have that family weekend trip over the holidays, and maybe there's a romantic getaway that you were on. By the way, this is examples only. It doesn't have to be trips. It could be conversations with friends or walks by the park or just reading a book outside. But experience points matter. And think about what brings you joy. What would give you more experience points? What are you doing that give you fewer experience points? And then he goes one better and he talks about memory dividends. Your experiences are great in the moment. They give you experience points, but then you remember that experience. And so to kind of give this the financial analogy, those are like the dividends that you get. So in year two, you get your year two experiences and you have the memories from year one. In year three, you've got year three experiences plus the dividends from years one and two, and so on. And so you get memory dividends. Now, the point that he tries to make, or that he does make, is that we can try to think through our lives in terms of what will give me the most experience points and help me remember, give me the best memory dividends. So now he's breaking this down into thinking about what we do with our life in terms of enjoyment, satisfaction, and memories. His recommendations, early is now. Right now, today, right now at this moment, this is the youngest you're ever going to be for the rest of your life. So think about what kinds of things you want to do while you're at the youngest you're ever going to be. Think about the people that you want to have those experiences with, and think about how you might improve your memory dividends. He doesn't talk about this, but I often found it helpful. He misses one, I think. In my opinion, he misses one aspect of this. Anticipation experience memory So experience is the joy you get from the actual experience itself. The memory is what you get after, but there's also an anticipatory aspect to it. Meaning, well, for example, if you surprise somebody with a vacation, hey, I called ahead, I got you a week off, we're going to go to Hawaii. That's cool, but you deprived them of being able to anticipate that trip and think about what they want to do on that trip. And there's also this peak end idea that we remember the beginning and the end of our experiences more than we remember the middle. So we can actually hack this is to give ourselves better memories. And that is, we can do something fun the first part of an experience. I'll just use a vacation as an example. First day, we got something great to do, and that helps me with that anticipation because that's the thing that I'm looking forward to. And then maybe I've got something really cool on the last day of the trip so that I'm bookending this trip with really cool things. And if I've got something boring to do, I have to run some errands, I got to do a little bit of work, you can bury that in the middle of your experience because you're less likely to remember that. And here's another hack. Mentally close your vacation on the last day of the vacation so that the travel day, which is usually stressful and crappy, that's not going to be included as part of your memory. So otherwise, the crappy travel day is the last thing you remember from the vacation. So how can you improve your memory dividends? Who do you want to have these experiences with? When do you want to do them? Aim to die with zero. This chapter is called Why Die with Zero. And in this chapter, he says, let's move from living on autopilot. Autopilot, if you know the elephant and the rider, this is elephant world. This is subconscious, putting no thought, no deliberation into what you're doing. So he wants to have people start living their lives more deliberately. And he has this example. I don't know why he uses $130,000, but he uses an example of somebody who dies with $130,000 left. It's so specific. I can't figure out why. He could have said $100,000 or $1 million, whatever. But somebody dies with $130,000 left in the bank, and he says, "What a waste." This person either could have had $130,000 more experiences, or they worked too much. They didn't have to earn that $130,000. What a waste. That's his point. They work too hard, they work too much. And then he gets pushback from people who say, well, what if I love my job? I didn't work too much if I love my job. And his response to that counter is, it's still a waste to not use that money. Maximizing your life doesn't care where your money came from. You still left it on the table. And so basically it's this chart. He says, our traditional view of growing money, for what? What's the point? Money is to be used. So his recommendations here, if you're concerned about dying with zero, if this freaks you out, he says, figure out where the psychological resistance is coming from and learn what it is that's freaking you out about dying with zero. He has ideas. I have ideas. It's probably fear, but I thought he took a little bit of I thought it was interesting to say, you've got a psychological problem if you're scared about this. And here's the point of my book. If you don't like it, figure out the psychological resistance. I thought it was a little bit arrogant, but nonetheless. Also, he says, if you love your job, find ways to spend money that fits your schedule so that you're not working and then dying with too much money. So use all your available tools to help die with zero. This chapter was called How to Spend Your Money Without Actually Hitting Zero Before You Die. And basically, this is the annuity chapter. He basically talks about longevity and being clear about how long you're actually likely to live. You know, don't plan to live to 100 if you don't exercise and smoke, for example. But if you're healthy, don't assume you're going to die at 80. You have to get clear about how long you're likely to live, and then consider annuities, not as investments, but as insurance of living too long. You can do a delayed annuity, something that starts to kick in when I'm 85 or something. So these are tools that we can use to actually prevent ourselves from running out of money. And again, I think there's a bit of redundancy in here. but maybe that's because I've been studying this stuff for years. He might be just trying to make a point. He asks again, what are we solving for, money or life? And his claim is that we are solving for total life enjoyment, and the money is the tool to give us life enjoyment. And here I like this section. He asks us to think about why we're so freaked out about running out of money. And it's because from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, we're hardwired for survival. Everyone in your ancestry survived. They survived long enough to have children, and you come from a long line of survivors. So avoiding death is the number one goal of life. Because if you die, that's multiplied by zero situation. You're out of the game. And so we have this built-in negativity bias, which says I need to be hyper focused on threats. Because if I miss an opportunity, I can live till tomorrow to look for that opportunity again. If I miss a threat, done. So this is hardwired into us, and it's that number one goal that dwarfs everything else. And it's why people will spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to prolong their life for a few more weeks at the end of their life. And he doesn't show a lot of sympathy for those people. He says, what a waste. You give up years of your life while you're healthy to buy a few extra days when you're sick and immobile. What a waste. But that's what we do. It costs tens of thousands of dollars to keep me in that hospital bed until finally I pass. So his recommendations here, if you're nervous about running out of money, look into annuities. So this is just the annuity chapter that helps people consider tools that they can use to prevent actually dying with zero. Because he says this a few times, he doesn't want anybody to actually run out of money when they still need money. It's the philosophy of using your money that he's talking about. Now, one common pushback that he gets, he says this is the number one thing people say. And so he had a whole chapter entitled, What About the Kids? He says, what about my kids? I want to leave my kids an inheritance. I want my kids to be better off than I was. Kids, inheritance. And he makes the claim, I don't know if I fully believe him or agree with him yet or not, but there's enough there. He makes the claim that trusts, wills, the estate plan, for the most part, for most people, is you got that lifeline, right? And it's shaded into whatever you've lived. The estate plan is for the accidental death. If you die unexpectedly, whoops, I died. What happens to the stuff now that I've accidentally died? He's making the claim that I should use up all my resources while I'm alive. So he brings back up memory dividends and says we want to create memory dividends, but many people who have children, they want to be a part of their kids' memory dividends. Right? So you don't want to have a cats in the cradle situation. So you can see people who work too much to build up the money to give the kids the inheritance at the expense of actually spending time with their children. So his pushback is, if you want to give your kids money, why don't you give your kids money now? This is a simple solution to him. Give the kids money now, or give them trips, give them experiences now that you can experience, that they can experience. Now they get to have positive memories of you, and they get money from you while you get to see them enjoy the money, and they get to still enjoy it with you. So the main claim he has for the people who say, what about the kids, is don't wait to give it to them. By the time you die at 85, they're 60. They don't need money yet. Or at that point, I mean. So give it to them while it can actually impact them. Give it to them when they're trying to buy their first house. Give it to them when they're moving across the country to get a new job. Don't wait until they're already adults with their own kids. Charity too. And here you go. There's this common story, Sylvia Bloom. If you've heard this one, the 96-year-old Brooklyn woman who lived by herself, no kids, worked as, I forget what she worked as, paralegal maybe, administrative assistant. Didn't make a lot of money, lived in a rent-controlled apartment, passed away, gave $8 million to charities. You see this talked about in various stories. Again, from the ant perspective, which says, look, you can amass a big fortune even without a high income. So he takes that story and he says, wait a second, this is 8 million bucks that she could have used. She didn't have to live like a miser. She's living in an apartment that was needs based, but she didn't need that. She had money that she could have afforded her own place. So she took an apartment away from somebody who might have needed it. And those charities had to wait to get this money. So even, even in this case, if you want to give money to charity, give it now, give it earlier. Don't wait. So he kind of has this pushback of, well, but I have an estate plan and I want to have my money get use after I pass away. He says, don't wait, do it now. What are you waiting for? So recommendations here, consider what ages you want to give your money to your kids. Talk to your partner about that. Have a plan to do this while you're living. Do some warm hand giving instead of cold hand giving. Same with charities, and do it today. Don't wait. Don't live your life on autopilot. This is called Balance Your Life. And autopilot, when he first starts the book, is people doing what they think they're supposed to do. I'm going to save, and I'm going to save, and I'm going to try to get as much money as I can. I'm optimizing for money. He wants to rattle people away from autopilot. But from his own experience, he said, I kind of jumped to the other side. A lot of people save on autopilot. I spend it on autopilot. What that means is that you don't just spend your money just to spend money. Spend your money when or in a way that gives you the best memory dividend. So for example, he gave an example in the book about how he bought a stereo. 50,000, I can't remember what the dollars, I'm making the numbers up. $50,000 stereo. But his ears couldn't tell the difference between that and the $10,000 stereo. So at this point, what was I getting for that $40,000? It was the same thing with meals. It was the same thing with cars. If there was a more expensive version, he was buying the more expensive version. And he finally realized, why am I doing this? I'm just spending to spend. I'm now on the other side. I'm spending on autopilot instead of saving on autopilot. So he makes the recommendation to know what you're getting and why. And if you're going to take risks, like quit your job and go on a hiking trip, he's got people in his circles that do this. Do so when you're young enough to recover from that. Don't do that when you have more to lose than you have to gain. So if you're going to spend money, he'll say on a trip to Nepal, do that in your 20s. You're old enough to recover, or you're young enough to recover from that, and you're getting memory dividends from that. Buying concert grade stereo equipment like he did, there's no payoff in memory dividends for that. Even if you can recover from it, he calls it a dumb risk to take, a dumb spending. So he's making the claim again, we're not trying to be an ant, we're not trying to be a grasshopper, we're trying to strike a balance between spending for the present, but only on what you value, and saving smartly for future versions of you that also want to have experiences. And here's where he talks about rules of thumb. Rules of thumb are helpful if you don't have any idea what to do, but it can't work. So he talks about the 50, 30, 20, needs, wants, savings. So save 20% of your income, 50% goes towards non-discretionary needs, and 30% goes on discretionary spending. They sound cool, but it just can't work on a cross section. Like that's one rule can't apply to everybody. And it can't apply to one person in a time series either, because a person's ability to, how does he say it? A person's ability to extract enjoyment from money declines over time. So you can't have one fixed rule of thumb. And he uses this 3-tiered idea that reminds me of trading. If you guys know, like say stock trading, you got a price that you want to get, you want to sell high or you want to buy low, you want to move a certain number of shares and you want to do it quickly, but you get to pick two. So you can move a lot of quantity at a good price, but that's going to take time. Or you can get a good price quickly, but it's not going to be a lot of quantity. And you can get a lot of quantity moved fast, but you're going to take a hit on the price. So you get to pick two when you're moving stock. Similarly, when you're having experiences, money, time, and health, pick two. So when you're young, you've got time, you've got health, but you don't have any money. When you're in your middle ages, you've got a more demanding job, you're raising kids, so you got the money, you got the health, but you don't have any time. And then by the time you're old enough, you're retired, now you've got money and you got the time, but sadly, you don't have any health anymore. So the young people, they got a deficit of time, or sorry, they got a deficit of money. They got the other two. Middle-aged folks, they've got time and health. I'm sorry, they got money and health, but they don't have time. And then by the time we hit our golden years, we don't have the health left. So the recommendation there is to, if you can, try to smooth this. So if you're young, you might sell time for money or figure out a way to do things cheaper. When you're in your middle ages, you're going the other way, try to spend money to buy time. When we're older, we're using our money to buy health. But even if that works, that can't work. It can work to an extent. But these three considerations are a lens that we use when we think about the experiences that we want to have. Do I want to wait to run the Boston Marathon, or will my health prevent me from doing that? So maybe I need to move that experience closer, and maybe I can take that Norwegian cruise later because that one doesn't require as much health. So recommendations in this chapter: think about your physical health. What can you do now that you might not be able to do later? So given that health line that I talked about, if you want to hike the Pacific Crest Trail, that one's an experience you might want to move closer. Some things you might be able to delay. And can you improve your health today so you can get more experiences? And if you're constrained by time, are there ways you can free up your money? Then he talks about thinking of your life as distinct seasons. He calls it start to time bucket your life. This is where it gets to the last time that I talked about earlier. He says you don't get an exact date when you're not going to be able to do things anymore. So, like hiking a pretty advanced trail, there's a time at which I'm not going to be able to do that. But whoever, you don't know exactly when that's going to be. Now, you can safely delay some experiences, but that's limited. But some you can't really delay. And here he brings up another thing that I talk about a lot, Bronnie Ware and her top 5 regrets of the dying, especially number 1 and 2. Number 1 is I wish I had lived a life that was true to myself instead of one that others expected of me. And regret number 2, I worked too hard, I worked too much. But seeing what people at the end of their lives regretted can inform us how we want to live our lives. So he uses this example. I love this one. I've used this one too. I think I got it from Seth Godin. I don't know where he got it. When you're on vacation, when you're a tourist, you experience the city differently than when you're at home. When you're on a trip, you're going to different restaurants, you're going to different museums, stadiums, and ball games, and you just have a different appreciation for the new city where you're a tourist. When you're at home, you kind of live on autopilot. My version of that is to view yourself as a tourist on Earth, because you're only here for a short amount of time, then you got to go. So the time buckets, he says, create time buckets. Now, this is not a bucket list. A bucket list is a single list of things that you want to do before you kick the bucket. That's helpful to think about what experiences that you want to do, but time buckets are to actually create little buckets. That's supposed to be a bucket. If I shade that, it'll look a little like a bucket. There's a bucket. So think about your life in these different buckets, and then you're putting experiences into these buckets. So some experiences are better done at certain ages. Some can wait. So you get to prioritize, say that bucket list, you get to prioritize them into different ages. I know these are only 3 examples. You'd have more if you actually did this. So in the younger bucket, the 25 to 30, you might say hike Machu Picchu, travel Western Europe, start a business, volunteer for Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Maybe in 40 to 50 bucket, I want to explore Northern Europe, swim with the sharks, ski the Alps, things that I still have the health for, but cost a little bit more money. So I've saved a little bit more for that. And then in my 75 plus years, maybe taking a Mediterranean cruise, volunteering at a homeless shelter. Maybe I'm somehow able to hike in the camp in the Grand Canyon. His recommendation is to not consider financial concerns yet, because as you've probably seen Amy talk about in fundamentals. People can be self-limiting. So if I'm considering money at the same time, I might say, well, I'm never going to be able to afford to take a Mediterranean cruise, so I'm not even going to put that on the list. We'll talk about the finances later, but at this stage, we're just trying to think about what experiences you want at what age to have them. So recommendations, if this, but with multiple buckets, feels too overwhelming, he says just create 3 buckets over the next 10 years, maybe 10 years, 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30 years from now. If you have kids, considering that overlapping timelines, what experiences do you want to have with your children within the next 1 or 2 years before that phase is over, while they still like hanging out with mom and dad? Well, so what can you do while they're at their current ages? And then know when to stop growing your wealth. This was an enormously long chapter, and there was a lot of repeats in here. This chapter could have got cut. I'll just be frank with you. But there was one cool thing that I like. This quote, he said, he threw a 45th birthday party for himself. Why not 50? Because his dad was already dead. His mom was declining in health. And if I want to throw a big party for myself, I want to do it now when the people that I know can with me. But he says, I could have celebrated my birthday by just looking at my monthly investment savings and IRA statements. I think that's such a funny way to think about what do you do as an advisor? Because a lot of advisors say, well, I help you celebrate by looking at how much money you have. But what kind of memory dividend is that? So helping people use their money, use their time in order to have experiences. Delaying gratification helps, being an aunt helps, but only to a point because you can delay too much. And so here I'll give you this age. There's 2 charts or two verticals here. Wealth, this is what you typically see with wealth. It kind of goes up over time, but then you take your physical ability and that kind of goes down over time. And this gives you different sections. This red section, it's below the wealth line. So you can afford these, but you don't have the health to do this anymore. That's my buddy's client who got to the pyramids but couldn't experience the pyramids. You've got this blue zone. This is the sweet spot. You can afford to do these and you have the ability to do these. And that unshaded zone, that's when you're young. You have the ability to do it, but you don't have the money to do it. So this is the same thing as those triangles. He just put it in a chart here. He suggests calculating your survival cost. That is, what's the bare minimum it takes to survive, and then do a time value of money calculation, an annuity due. That's how much you need to actually survive. And then, I mean, it gets really math heavy, and I don't know. If you like this chapter, you can go ahead and read it, but I think it's a waste of time. So you need to read this chapter. There is a couple things though. He comes back again to understand your values, and he brings up Mir Statman. If you know who he is, it's not scheduled yet, but we do have he's going to be a guest on a future webinar here. So come check out Mir Statman. He's got a new book out. He has said, business class, always worth it. It's worth every penny. It's worth more than I paid. I get consumer surplus with flying business class. Love it. I would pay more for it. But even though I can afford a $300 meal, I feel stupid paying too much for money. Or sorry, paying too much for food. I feel like there's a chef in the back laughing at me. I'm not going to pay that. Now there's other people. I'm a foodie. I want to go have really rich experiences at restaurants, fine dining, but I'm not going to pay for business class. I can get there for $80 on Spirit. Why would I waste money on business class? So whatever that is for you, whatever that is for the client, you have to figure out what's worth spending the money on and what not. I missed recommendations. Yeah, so his recommendations: calculate your annual survival cost, consult your doctor to find out what your biological age is versus your chronological age. He gets into age is how you feel versus how old you are. But it comes back to getting clear about how old you might live and what your physical abilities are so that you can have those experiences. And then he concludes with take risks when you have little to lose. Again, a bit of redundancy in this chapter. The chapter's title, Be Bold, Not Foolish. Basically what he's saying is take advantage of asymmetric risk. So if there's a huge payoff, if it hits, but it's not going to matter much if you lose, that's a good risk to take. So it makes sense to be bold in those cases. When you're older, some risks are just more foolish than bold. You have more to lose than you have to gain. So this is a common theme that he brings up. I think he's closing here because he doesn't want people to say, "Hey, I'm suggesting just sell all your stuff and go on hiking trips all the time." He's saying only do these things when you've considered the upsides and the downsides. So recommendations here: identify opportunities that uh, that don't have much risk. They don't have much downside. Taking a walk with a friend, that's a great experience that you can have. Costs almost no money, costs almost no effort. And you're better off taking bigger risks, maybe hiking trips or more adventurous things when you're younger. Take a look at some fears that might be holding you back, what might be getting in your way. And he concludes with realize that every moment, I wrote this down, let's see, realize that at every moment you have a choice. The choices you make reflect your priorities. So be sure you're making those choices deliberately. So these are the chapters. Uh, I'm gonna end here with my favorite line from the whole book because I think this is worth saying out loud. People are more afraid of running out of money than they are of wasting their life. I'll say that again. People are more afraid of running out of money than they are of wasting their life. So in the end, he tells us that the business of life is the acquisition of memories, and right now is the youngest you're ever going to be. So, in the words of the great philosopher, poet, and painter Bob Ross, go out on a limb. That's where the fruit is. So that's what he proposes in the book. There's a couple of things that I think could be improved. He talks about um, smoothing consumption. He talks about smoothing consumption. So when you're young, your income's only going up, usually, for most people. So it makes sense to go into debt so that you can smooth your consumption over time. This can make sense if you're economically speaking, but you're developing bad habits, and he doesn't address those bad habits. Uh, he's got a central focus of memories, but he doesn't really address the fact that, and maybe this is on purpose, but we don't recall memories perfectly. Memories, sometimes we misremember things. Two people can have been through the same experience and we take different things away from it. I think he missed the anticipation piece that we talked about earlier. Um, and this is something that I wouldn't say he got wrong, but could boost his argument. There's something called euphoric recall, which is with memories, we tend to look back with a more positive spin on things. So that's why if you can look back long enough to a trip that was stressful in the moment, you might laugh about it now. It's like, God, do you remember that time we couldn't pick a place to eat and it was raining out all the time? We were at each other's throats. Oh my God, it was so crazy. But we're laughing about it now. Or we don't even remember the fights and we only remember the good stuff. So that's what I think. What if those two have read the book? What did you think of the book, or what did you think about how it was presented here?
Um, I really enjoyed it. I agree with a lot of things you said, Derek. I read the acknowledgments at the end. I don't know if you read that part, but it sounds like he had a lot of friends rein him in a little bit with some of the
Oh,
parts of it. He might have been a little arrogant. He would acknowledge some of that.
I didn't. I should
Uh,
read that.
yeah. Um, I mean the memory dividend, yeah, kind of it was a new way of looking at it for me. Granted everything you said. I mean, I just the other day I was thinking about a trip I took 15 years ago, and I literally sat there for 5 minutes enjoying like every step of the way.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I guess one of my initial reactions is like, oh my God, am I falling in this trap? Am I stressing for my clients too much on the numbers and being safe and all the things? So yeah, I'm still processing it, but I enjoyed it. It was a good read. The health span, part two, like yeah,
Mhm.
that's something to really consider. Opportunities decrease as you go along.
Yeah.
Um, And do we want to front load a bunch of that stuff? And I do agree with giving to kids earlier too. Like, well, if you can give to a kid when they're 35 instead of 60, what kind of
Mhm.
impact? And you get to view it all. So yeah, there's a lot I'm thinking
Right.
about. I really enjoyed it. So
Right.
thanks for presenting this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing those acknowledgments.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Tom.
I read the book also, particularly the chapter 5. What about the kids? I get that pushback. I get that pushback from my wife over the weekend.
Hmm.
Although she just gave our daughter a pretty significant sum to help her
Mhm.
buy a townhouse. Um,
Hmm.
but it's something that I have a couple of client meetings that are coming up with some folks that they're never going to use all their money. And the one client that I'm thinking about, the one they have one child, and that child has no idea and very little concept of
Hmm.
larger sums of money.
Yeah.
Adult child, 40 something child, she's lived her entire life with practically nothing. She couch surfs, she works minimally, she teaches yoga, she really doesn't have a lot of material wants. And
Hmm.
my concern is that, when her parents are gone, she's going to come into like 5 million bucks. And, I asked the mom, years ago, I said, well, how would that change your daughter's life? And she really, she didn't have an answer. She tried to have a conversation with the daughter. And, so the daughter said, what, you got like $180,000? It's no, it's like right now it's $3 million. So what I'm going to suggest to the mom is, hey, how about you give your daughter some money now? Give her a significant amount. And I don't know what that significant number is. Is it 30,000, 50,000, 100 grand? See what happens.
Mhm.
It may send her off the deep end. She may, all of a sudden it may change her perspective on, the way she lives her life, or and for the good or bad. I don't know. I don't know the daughter. I haven't. I've made a couple of attempts to meet the daughter. It just hasn't worked out timing wise. Um, but that's one of the things I'm going to put on the list for this particular client. That hey, let's do a try run. Let's see what happens. Give her some money. See what she does with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good points. And it reminds me of another, um, again, I don't want to say anything's wrong, but another piece that could be expanded on is it's not as easy as just give it to the kids, give it
Yeah.
to the kids now, because you could create a financial enabling situation where now they're not able to survive on their own, or um, the stereotype is the spoiled kid that, well, I'm going to get 30,000 from mom and dad this year. Why would I need to care? Or I'm going to get more than that, right? So
Yeah, it could be as easy as just, funding some Roth IRAs. And,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
okay, I'll fund the IRA for you so that you don't have to, or
mm,
college funds, or things like that.
right,
I have another client,
yeah,
that's kind of what they're doing. They're funding college funds for, at this point, it's 3 or 4 very young grandchildren. So that's so that the parents don't have to do it. Now it's entirely so the two sons that they're doing it for, they don't have the money to do it. The daughter, I don't know so much that, and those grandchildren are probably older, but it's that's their way of just
yeah,
transporting it early, and they're not thinking of it in terms of die with zero. And again, and these are folks
right,
that
right,
they're never ever going to spend all their money. I mean, it would have to be something catastrophic, an asteroid,
right,
wiping
right,
out everything, wiping out SEI, to take their money. But
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing those. Those are good points to consider. Any other thoughts? Got a couple minutes left.
I just think it's, again, for us as advisors coming up with good questions. And
Mhm.
it is that we're thinking partners, when it
Yeah,
comes to adult children. It's like, how do I call it, are you giving them a umbilical cord? Are you providing an umbilical cord or a lifeline? Or are you creating an entitlement mindset? And so there's all sorts of tools out there that can kind of help guide us in good conversations and empathetic listening
Yeah.
to really understand where the client's coming from. I love the idea of giving adult children smaller amounts. Talked about it back when your kids were really little. You give them a smaller amount and you actually hope
Yeah.
they might fail because they'll learn something
Right.
from it.
Right.
And as then you've got adult children, it's like, how much do you get them? Are you okay with failure with 10,000, 30,000? I mean, and so it's all really good conversation. It takes time on our part to unpack a lot of that. I know and it takes time to build the relationships to where you feel you can have these conversations. I've got one client that I've had for about 12 years, and we've moved from that just to accumulate more and more and more to, oh, let's discern how much we want to put into the DAF this year. How did that charitable
Yeah.
remainder trust work? How much should we be gifting to our kids or for our grandkids? What are the best tools to be using? It takes time, and I appreciate books and the opportunity to have conversation like this to dig into it. So thank you, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's another element too that I didn't even think about until you were sharing, is often we think about the accumulation phase and the decumulation phase, but that's a switch that's not easy for clients. But if you have the mindset of this is a tool, and yes, the tool is going to go up, you can have more of the tool, but the tool is eventually going to go down. It can have the potential at least to get rid of your clients that you see who I hate spending money. I don't want to spend money. I'm a saver. Um, because we have two phases, accumulate, decumulate.
Yeah, I think he has a graph in there, right, where he's trying to push the peak back a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Like as
Yeah.
opposed to like, retirement date. Okay, well, what if we push that back,
Yep.
50s or what have you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting to think about. Yeah, like whatever that portfolio is when you're dead, is that a pile of memories you could have had? So for a
Right.
client that is just so scared of spending, even though they're totally overcapitalized, kind of presenting it in a different way, like,
Yeah,
that's going to go
exactly.
away.
Right. Right. All right. Well,
Right.
thanks everybody. We're
Yeah.
at the top of the hour here. So appreciate your joining and joining the discussion. I think it's a lot of fun. This is the kind of stuff that I like talking about, memories and anticipation and experiences. And can you still do it while you can?
I was saying thanks to Derek. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My
Indeed.
pleasure.
And as always, make sure to check out moneyquotient.com/events for a full list of upcoming events. If you have any questions about this or any other webinar, don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email. We hope to hear from you soon, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for your time today, and have a good one, everybody.